On this episode of Rog's Talking Drums, I'm going to be talking with Ed Clift, representative for Paiste Cymbals since 25 years. We'll be covering a brief overview of Paiste's history, sampling many of Paiste's revered and unique sounds, and get to know more about Ed's work with drummers and percussionists all over the world. You'll get to see Ed in action behind his drum set, demonstrating various applications of Paiste cymbals, sounds, and gongs. Make sure to stay to the end of this episode where we learn how Ed overcomes the demands of life on the road in his work for Paiste.
Lawrence, you're going to be envious.
Drums, drummers, and the drumming industry. Hello, my name's Paul Rodney, better known as The Rog. I'm not an authority, nor do I claim to be. I played the drums most of my life. I've worked in artist relations for 2 drum product manufacturers. I served as a product tester at times and even took a stab at my own drum company. There's a unique bond between drummers unlike any other instrument, which surpasses race, sex, age, and religion. It makes us a unique group of people. Drums are my passion. They are my life. Welcome to Rog's Talking Drums.
All cymbals are necessarily cast in the early stage of cymbal production. We do use an off-site foundry and has the capabilities that go far beyond what you find at a cymbal company. These flat discs really begin to come to life at the hands of our master craftsmen. It's one thing to have a given alloy or how you mix the raw materials even, but it's another thing what you do with that alloy to unlock its sound potential. And all our professional lines do that the old-fashioned way, and we do that by hand. There's no substitute for the touch of a human being, and every single critical step of the production process is controlled by the touch of a human being at the Paiste factory. It's all of Paiste's generations of experience together with a given alloy that produce the spectacular results that we see today.
Who's this guy? Look at this gong. We get to bang the gong later on, baby. Yeah!
Born in Wyoming and growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, it wasn't until the 3rd grade that he discovered the thing that would define his life. His first set was a Slingerland drum kit that his parents got for him in a Phoenix pawn shop that had a less than desirable finish, but they served their purpose. His second set was a walnut stained finish Camco that was purchased a few years later. Crediting Cubby from the Mickey Mouse Club as his first inspiration, he quickly moved on to the great Buddy Rich. During his formative years, drummers like Steve Smith, Carl Palmer, Ginger Baker, Ian Paiste, among others, served as additional inspirations. Immersing himself in the local scene, he focused mainly on rock, progressive rock, and fusion styles of music, but was willing to try any style of music that he wasn't familiar with.
Oh, this proves that the Rog is mightier than the gong.
His immersion into the scene also allowed him to meet people that would help him grow as a musician. First notably was Mark Murdoch, a prominent Phoenix drummer who played for the band Brand X that was formerly throned by drummer-composer Phil Collins. Their friendship gained Ed access to meet and learn from many of his inspirations such as Steve Smith, Billy Cobham, Tony Williams, and Bill Bruford. Another notable Phoenix name that he found inspiration from was Peter Magadini, who authored the book Polyrhythms. Although he never studied with Peter, he was a big influence. Ed continued to play in the local scene through the 80s and spent most of his time focusing on and honing his craft. Needing a change of scene, he moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1979. He launched himself headfirst as a session and live player, garnering him quickly a respected name in the Minneapolis music scene. During this time, he worked for a well-known Minnesota-based computer company. Still feeling the call for music and his love for all things drums, he decided to pursue a career with Paiste, but not before adding one more love to his life, that of his lovely future wife-to-be, who he met at his job. Jump to 1984. Realizing he didn't want to do his then current job for the rest of his life, he sat down and made a list. If he could do anything, what would it be? Thinking back to his experience in 1976, at the top of his list was work with Paiste. Ed read frequently that Paiste was pioneering a new form of promotion that in later years would be known as drum clinics. He felt he could help develop this new idea, and that's exactly how he approached Paiste towards the end of 1984. His time with Paiste grew slowly as he proved himself. By the end of 1985, he was in charge of a 2.5-state territory, providing sales and workshops as often as he could. Things at this point seemed to speed up for him. Being self-motivated, he expanded his territory by conducting workshops and clinics to both music retailers and schools. His focus was to educate people about cymbal sounds and sound application. Through his many years with Paiste, Ed has performed all over the world as a clinician. He's provided clinic support for Nico McBrain, Chad Wackerman, Chester Thompson, Dave Garibaldi, Bill Bruford, Carl Palmer, and others. Clinics are very important to Ed. It's his passion to continually evolve what a clinic is. There have been many high points in his Paiste career, some of which are bringing new artists to the Paiste family, becoming a product specialist, a liaison between Paiste and artists in the development of new sounds, and one of his proudest moments is his involvement with and the development and release of the Paiste alloy cymbals in 1989. This is an amazing setup. I'm so excited about this. This is just amazing. Can't believe it. Anyways, this is a great backdrop. Let's start off with the Paiste history.
Believe it. This is reality. Welcome to my world.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your world. Let's start off with the Paiste history. As far back as I know, it starts off around 1901 with Mikkel Paiste owning a music store. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Right. Fairly meager beginnings for what is now an internationally renowned cymbal maker. It's the great-grandfather of my boss, Eric Paiste. Paiste Company came about at the turn of the century, and a small music shop that Mikkel had that was selling things like Victrolas and some musical instruments, and he became interested in cymbal making. Sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, and people were asking for cymbals. Most notably, eventually the Estonian military actually put in an order for some, and he started cymbal making in those very meager early beginnings.
Well, they started out in Estonia, then they moved to Poland, Germany, and then they ended up in Switzerland. Can you tell me a little bit about what that process was like going through a very turbulent time in the history of the world?
Yeah, you know, the Estonian Revolution, the Russian Revolution, World War I, World War II. Most notably World War II, when the company was being headquartered in Poland, of all places. The outbreak of World War II put the big kibosh on that, and would be enough to maybe snuff out a lesser entity than Paiste proved to be, and came back with a commitment and a persistence, locating themselves in Switzerland, which was a neutral place to be politically, and flourished. To this day, the Paiste is headquartered in Switzerland, in a small town called Nottville, which is just outside of Lucerne, and then up in Rendsburg, the northern tip of Germany.
Well, can you tell me about the early days of cymbal manufacturing?
Well, it's much like today. There are two ways to do it: trial and error. And in the earliest days of researching and learning by doing, some of those earliest experiences making cymbals and and learning from those who had learned, the art form of cymbal making produces results.
What I thought was really interesting is that early on, people used to individually just walk into the store and say, hey, I need something. Isn't that how it happened initially? And they'd actually just hand hammer it right on site?
Yeah, in the earliest days, an individual would ask for a cymbal, and Michael would produce that cymbal. Even though the musical environment was so very different in those years than today, the fundamentals of the music asking for a given cymbal is kind of what happens. And the drum set is a relatively new instrument in the grand scheme of things. The formative years of the drum kit as such saw a lot of development and a fairly rapid pace too. And when a drummer would accent or punctuate a musical phrase with a small, thin cymbal, it had a splashy sound and hence called a splash. The thing is, in the early years, especially like in the 30s, the 40s, cymbals were largely made in a more of a happenstance manner. Cymbal makers were relying on accidental results, and really the proof of that is how cymbals would be shipped to the shop without a stamp on there identifying it as a ride or a crash or what have you. And the cymbal maker would send the cymbals into the shops with a set of rubber stamps. And it would be up to the shop owner and the drummer to decide what kind of cymbal that was. And to this day, certainly drummers associate a certain sound with a certain name. The names of cymbals have become just all over the map. Different names mean different things to different drummers. Like a fast crash has a really fast response. That fast crash has become a bit of a benchmark in terms of how cymbals are identified. And Paiste has done a lot of hard work to demystify some of that sort of proprietary terminology as well.
It's the memoir of a modern instrumentalist, an intriguing look behind the curtain at life at the heart of progressive rock and electric jazz. It's the truth about being a professional touring musician. It's about 40 years on the road, in the studio, and playing drums his way.
I wrote the book because I want people to have a clearer idea of what it is being a musician.
It seemed to me that rhythm was everywhere, although nobody else really noticed it. It was in the air, it was in the kitchen clock, it was in the tick-tock of my father's windshield wipers. I guess I thought I could be a music star in the music world and a normal guy in the normal world. Mostly it worked, fooled some of the people some of the time. So I'm sitting at the rooftop pool at the Sheraton here in New York City, listening to Roundabout played every 40 minutes on the radio. I don't have a clue where the money's coming. Well, the problem with success is that right after success comes repetition. And I didn't just want to troll around the world stadiums playing close to the edge with yes. Well, I'd been stalking Robert Fripp for some time and finally conceded to all my badgering. The only time I was famous, and for the obligatory 15 minutes, was for a negative, for leaving Yes. I was from a looser background, from a jazz background, and I thought the idea was you joined groups and you moved through them, gave to it, learned from it, and moved on. Yes, King Crimson, Genesis, UK, in short order, came and went real fast. I was starting to get a reputation as a group hopper. At a deeper level, a musician is involved in this endless struggle to master this instrument, and it's got nothing to do with record companies, chart positions, hit records. When we formed these progressive rock bands, you kind of slit wrists, mingled blood until death us do part. I would maybe prefer to looser culture, where some of the musicians swap bands or repertoire for an album or a tour. Maybe Roger Waters played with King Crimson, or Chris Squire played with Pink Floyd, or John Bonham played with Yes. I was able to play the music I wanted, where I wanted, with whom I wanted, and when I wanted, and get paid handsomely for it.
Bill Bruford, The Autobiography, available wherever fine books are sold.
Let's talk about 1989. I'm going to be drum geek here. I was actually at the release of this when you did this in Minneapolis. The new alloy. And now this is an amazing new concept. Can you please describe the new concept of the Paiste exclusive alloy?
Well, I'm so pleased that you were there. And what Paul's referring to was a really incredible coup in my career with Paiste, where we had the great Jeff Porcaro, God rest his soul, at a clinic event at Schmidt Music in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. We brought Jeff Porcaro in along with his one of his musical partners, David Garfield, and created a rhythm section here in town. Chaz Carlson on keyboards and Bruce Balgard on bass. And it was a really incredible experience. More than 8 years prior to that, Robert Paiste had a brainchild about using a different alloy for cymbal making. It is the first time that anybody has created a bronze alloy exclusively for the sounds of cymbals. They're the most beautiful, sophisticated cymbals available then or now, and has resulted in a whole family of sound. But that debut of the signature line in 1989, where we had Mr. Porcaro on hand to demonstrate those cymbals in a musical context, was really a watershed moment.
Oh, it was amazing. And what I loved about it so much is that when you talk about your full line, it was a full line of cymbals. And there was like, I can't even count how many rows of cymbals. I think it took me an hour to get through testing every one of them, if I remember right. It was ridiculous. But drummer geeks unite. Well, Paiste is so well known for sonically matching their specific sizes and series of cymbal. How early on did that concept come in when they were developing lines?
Well, there's a certain musicality between the lines of cymbals, and it's interesting because it extends through time as well. So cymbal lines, both past and present, have a certain musicality, we say, and correspond in a musical way. So therefore, if you have a really diverse cymbal setup, such as you see upon the drum kit here, there isn't going to be a certain cymbal that has a frequency that sticks out like a sore thumb. They work together. There's a blend of sound, if you will, that is designed into all Paiste cymbals, both past and present, which makes the design of a cymbal setup a really interesting proposition, because you can really put any cymbal together, any Paiste cymbal, from even past cymbal lines with modern cymbal lines, and they'll correspond in a musical way.
Well, Paiste has made so many unique innovations to the music industry. How has it helped to define modern cymbal making?
Well, there's very many Paiste innovations that became a benchmark in cymbal making and became a guiding factor in cymbal sound. A great example would be in the late 60s when electronic music was becoming more and more part of the scene, amplified music, higher sound levels, basically, drummers competing with guitar players, for example, on the stage sonically. And, the music there again, the music was asking for a cymbal sound that had more energy and projection. And that's where Robert Paiste innovated the use of the CUSN8 alloy for cymbal making. And that's not necessarily a bronze alloy that's unique to cymbal making, but Paiste pioneered the use of that in cymbal making and perfected its application in the world of cymbal sound. In the early days, there were earlier cymbal lines, Istanbul and the Giant Beat that came about. A great example would be Led Zeppelin 1. That's a fairly prominent benchmark recording that features that sound.
Okay.
And because that type of music is still popular today, that's still a very relevant sound, interestingly. And it's really, like Eric Paiste said a few years ago, what we do is it's all about the music, the drummers, and finally the cymbals. And it comes from the music, and the musical environment that a drummer or percussionist find themselves in will require a given sound and function, and that's where Paiste comes in.
Let's go to the next phase of this whole thing. I want to do a walkthrough on your cymbals and some of your performance. So should we just go ahead and do that?
Sounds good to me.
All righty.
Fala galera, sejam bem-vindos ao meu novo DVD e dessa vez eu vou abordar vários assuntos que eu não abordei no Inside My Drums. Vamos falar sobre técnica, vamos falar sobre conceitos básicos, muitos exercícios para 2 bumbos e eu vou mostrar todo o meu conceito e a minha forma de tocar bateria. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. O próximo exercício é para te ajudar a evitar ou terminar com a técnica do cru-cru. O que seria a técnica do cru-cru? É quando você começa a tocar assim.
This is an amazing array. I'm extremely excited about this right now. I can't believe it. It's like Paiste factory threw up right in here.
Well, I'd say we got a little bit of Swiss candy in here.
The thing is, you have a great snapshot of some of the offerings that Paiste has. Can you tell us a little bit about what you brought today?
It is a snapshot. That's a good way to say it's really the tip of the iceberg.
Talk a little bit about how well the Paiste sounds record.
You don't have to color the sound much. You don't have to get involved with extensive EQing of cymbal sounds in the studio with Paiste. There's, of course, a lot of famous session players that have made Paiste famous. Russ Kunkel is interesting. He's a producer in his own right and made a lot of comments to me over the years about how great Paiste cymbals work for him in the studio. And engineers comment all the time, you know, how great Paiste cymbals are to work with. It's an amazing thing, you know. There's just a lot of very important recordings where you find the Paiste sound.
Talking about the Paiste sound, the sound library, I'll call it here, the gong specifically, they're used in a lot of movies.
Well, that's true, Paul. I mean, Emil Richards is an important Paiste artist and does a lion's share of recording in the LA scene for soundtrack work, and is famous for using Paiste gongs on a number of important films. I'm reminded of, I think it was maybe Star Trek 3 where the Enterprise blows up.
I think it was Star Trek 2. Sorry. I geeked out for a minute there, dude. Sorry.
And so that low frequency that you feel in your chest and the theater at that moment are the low frequencies that come from a 60-inch symphonic gong. Why don't we just play the collection of sounds we have here and give you a chance to just hear how cymbal lines that we make and percussive sounds that we offer can work together in a musical way.
That'd be perfect. Let's do it.
We have a 50-inch symphonic here and creates just a tremendous low frequency range. Think of the idea of a whole symphony of sound all in one instrument.
Wow, that's a beautiful sounding thing. It's amazing.
And you can see it takes a really just a light touch to get the instrument moving, and it just takes on a life of its own. Really an incredible sound. An amazing instrument and craftsmanship from another planet, really, to make these. The craftsmen literally take the raw material, the nickel silver that we use to make gongs, and hammer the life into them. Using the ancient art form of gong making, only Paiste offers a truly defined and musical range of gongs. This is a 34-inch symphonic gong. You'll notice that the gongs have an etching on the face.
Yes.
And that's where the craftsman scribes this etching with a tooling knife, as opposed to the gong that we have in the rear here, what we call a sound creation gong, completely different hammering pattern. It takes about 6 or 7 weeks to make a gong like that.
Wow.
The metal has to actually rest between some of the stages of hammering. That's a 38-inch version of that. There's a 60-inch version of this, which is, of course, is this is a 50-inch, so you can imagine the 60 is a monster. Mm-hmm. And then this goes all the way down to a 28-inch version of this as well. The Rotosound disc is interesting. It creates a vibrato effect when you spin it. This piece is my instrumental arrangement of Keith Emerson's Hand of Truth. The drum part, inspired by Carl Palmer, features the white noise of 18 and 22-inch power chinas, positioned above and below the primary hi-hat cymbals. Nothing like a Formula 602 20-inch medium ride, a wonderful general-purpose cymbal. My musical formative years in the 70s were largely occupied with the progressive rock scene, epitomized by ELP. This piece is a more contemporary expression of those times.
Can we take a look at a cymbal right now? Can you describe the anatomy of a cymbal before I go any further?
Well, the different elements of the cymbal, of course, are the bell, the taper, the hammering pattern, the bow of the cymbal. We make cymbals the old-fashioned way and shape the cymbal with a hammer. All of these factors make up the sound of the cymbal. It's not fair to separate just one thing out, for example. Every cymbal that is lathed is thicker toward the bell and thinner out toward the edge, more so with a relatively thinner cymbal like a crash cymbal, which needs to be responsive. This taper is achieved on a lathe where we cut metal off of the cymbal, and that's done down to a tolerance of within 1/100th of a millimeter. Wow. So that's like the thickness of a very fine human hair. During the lathing process, that's checked with a micrometer on every single cymbal. So there's a high level of control that goes into each stage of manufacture that ensures a reliable sound and function when we get to the end of the production process. The crotales come from what's known as an antique cymbal. A lot of symphonic literature, you find what's called a cymbal antique, and that's a small tuned cymbal. These have a definite pitch, and Paiste is the sole supplier of a 2.5 octave range of these, also with a damper system that we offer. Paiste developed that concept also during the 70s. We offered what we call tuned discs, which are made from a different alloy. These are made from SN-BZ20 alloy, same as our Formula 602, and also the same as sound creation cymbals. We make finger cymbals out of that material. So that's the crotale. And then these are cup chimes, and they're useful for the multi-percussionist or the drum set player, or a nice exotic bell type sound.
Haven't I seen these used in addition to like a regular cymbal?
Yeah, a cup chime or an accent cymbal, but oftentimes a drummer will use a cup chime inverted, compounded on top of like a crash. Okay. And then you have two sound sources on one stand, and you can play the cup chime together with a different cymbal such as a crash.
Let's talk about the chinas quickly. We've got the chinas over here, and can you kind of give us a little description?
The China cymbal is one that has a squarish bell design. You can see here on the traditional medium light China that the bell actually has a bit of a flange on it. They're handheld instruments, and that shape of bell is in effect a handle to hold on to the cymbal. Again, back to the 602, you can see an early example of a Turkish bell on a China cymbal. Paiste was early innovator in that area, making China cymbals to begin with even. This 602, the 20-inch China that we see here, has the domed Turkish-style bell. It's really a smooth-sounding cymbal. Another example with the Turkish type of bell is the medium light swish. This is a popular cymbal with jazz drummers. Creates a really warm cushion of sound. And then when we move over to the 2002 China, which as you look on the underside of the cymbal, you can see the square bell. This is a really popular China cymbal in the Paiste program. A lot of rock players use this type of cymbal and will oftentimes invert them and play it upside down in this way. It's a really explosive cymbal. It's got a lot of projection. Variation on that came in the early 80s is called a Novo China, where it's an inverted design, and you can see the bell has It's an inverted design, so that when it's mounted right side up, it's in effect upside down. It's a bit louder cymbal. It can move freely as opposed to when you mount them inverted this way. So it is a bit louder, but it's a kind of a smoother sound as well. That happens to be an 18-inch rock china in the 2002 range.
Okay. Can you tell us about this china?
This is the traditional medium light china, and it's a very dry sound. It's a bit more complex sound and more suitable for acoustic music.
Now, how many products can you actually cross-use in the Paiste line?
Well, it's really only limited by your imagination. The linear approach to Mark Isham's sublime feline was inspired by Terry Bozzio's work on Group 87's recording from 1980. This was a band way ahead of its time and remains a relatively obscure piece of work by this atypical unit formed by Isham. The fixed hats, triple raw smash, china, cup chime, and bell sounds abound here. It's my feeble attempt at one of Bozzio's broken tank grooves. I've specifically developed material for my Paiste workshops to demonstrate the use of sound colors for drum set. I've been told this tune really does that nicely.
Hi there, boys and girls. Mickey D here from Motorhead. And the cymbals I play are Paiste cymbals. I've been with them forever. It's the best in the business. Super good stuff. Check it out.
Here are two 20-inch 2002 cymbals. We have a thin crash on our left and a power crash on our right. So we have a very heavy, relatively thick cymbal and a lighter weight, thin cymbal here. Thick and thin. So a real obvious contrast in sound and pitch. The thicker cymbal is higher pitched. It also is louder. It also sustains at peak volume longer. The idea here is more mass produces more volume. This is really important when it comes to cymbal selection. If you're playing at higher sound levels and you're playing in a band that is doing louder music, you need to think about having larger or heavier cymbals. Now, what we talk about here with thick and thin also kind of corresponds to size when we think about mass or we think about the total weight of a cymbal. Here we have 4 cymbals that are the same relative thickness or weight but different size. So we have a 17, 18, 19, and 20. These are dark energy crashes. So there, that produces a nice musical progression. Here's a great example of 2 contrasting models and sizes within the signature family. A 16-inch crystal thin crash and a 22-inch heavy full crash. The crystal thin crash is almost like a big splash. The heavy full crash is just a beautiful, big sounding crash that will decay over 2 measures.
Can you tell me a little bit about the flat style of bell? How does that affect the cymbal sound?
Well, first of all, that comes from an older model in our program from the sound creation line. It was called the short crash, a splashy sound, short decay. It was something you can use to accent or punctuate a musical phrase.
Okay. Let's talk about the bells and the splash.
Again, kind of an extreme example of the idea of thick and thin. So the splash cymbal, a very thin cymbal, a delicate sounding cymbal, and the bell is a very heavy cymbal, so high pitch and long sustain. Within the signature family of sound, we have the standard signature cymbals, which spans a lot of different sound and function given all the models and sizes. And then there's what we call new signature, more developed models that don't fit neatly into a line identity. And a good example is the Mark I and the Mark II rides. We heard the dark energy crashes. Really sister cymbals. They're a very similar cymbal, although a bit of difference in the lathing technique. This is a bit more responsive. It's a bit more crashable than the Mark I, although it does have good stick definition. So the Mark I has even a bit more stick definition, a little bit drier sound character.
No! No!
Earlier we touched upon the artist-inspired cymbal line. Can you talk to us about that?
That's an exciting project, and it goes back some years collaborating with a top Paiste artist to produce a sound that is an important part of their setups. One notable example there is the Eclipse ride, where we collaborated with John Dolmayan and System of a Down. A few more that we have here today are the 22-inch bell ride, the Power Slave ride that Nico McBrain uses.
Well as Lawrence Patterson, my co-host on the audio show. I just want to make that very, very clear. It's very important.
Nice.
He's also a Paiste endorsee. Did you know that?
Yes. I'm looking forward to meeting him up close and personal.
He's a great guy. Okay, let's talk about this. This is a really cool cymbal here.
Nico McBrain's been using a bell ride since a long time. Happy Paiste endorsee. Nico McBrain is really part of the family. He's one of the Paiste artists that have a lot of history with the company. He was using the Sound Creation bell ride for many years. That inspired him to request that type of cymbal in the signature alloy, which he has since become attached with and uses a lot of signature cymbals. He's used many cymbals in the program through the years. It's an amazing cymbal and bespeaks the Nico McBrain sound.
Now, let's talk about the special feature that's on this one exclusive cymbal now. Let's take a look at this.
Well, last month I went to see Iron Maiden in Chicago, and this particular cymbal belongs to a young friend of mine who I promised we would get Nico's autograph. And you'll notice here, Nico signed it, but also the whole band signed this cymbal. This is, I think, the only Power Slave ride in the world that has the whole band's signatures on it. So this young friend of mine is a very happy camper.
And he's now soon to be my new friend too as well. Just want to state that for the record. No, this is an amazing cymbal. This is a piece of history. Iron Maiden, wow. Can't believe it.
Quite a good general purpose cymbal. It's not as though it's only good for metal. But next artist-inspired cymbal we have on tap here is the Rhythmatist. And we collaborated with the incredible Stuart Copeland of the Police. We worked closely with Stuart making this cymbal. I say we. Eric Paiste takes a personal interest in these artist-inspired projects, and Eric worked closely with Stuart within the creation of the Bluebell ride. This is a 22-inch cymbal, and like the Power Slave ride, is also made from the signature alloy.
Now, let's talk about this logo right here a little bit now. This is Stuart Copeland. Why is he riding a donkey?
That's not a donkey. Stuart's a polo player. He plays polo and is a horseman, and that's part of his lifestyle. It's also a colored cymbal. That goes back to the early 80s when Paiste first introduced the color sound cymbals, color sound 5s they were called.
And how much involvement did he have on the overall look of this? And the pounding, the finish, everything?
The overall surface treatment and aesthetic of this cymbal, again, it was a close collaboration between Stuart and Eric Paiste, and yeah, he had everything to say about it. Later in the 80s, they were incorporated into the 2000 series, the 2000 color sounds. It's a really beautiful cymbal and a beautiful sounding cymbal, I might say.
Did he use this on the most recent reunion tour?
Yes, indeed. And it's not a special cymbal that can only be found in a vault somewhere. So if somebody's interested in that sound, we'll make more.
And now, one of my favorite drummers of all time. All these drummers here are some of my favorite drummers. But this one is a special one. The Reverend Al Big Ride.
Many fans of Alex Van Halen immediately think of the 2002 sound. He helped popularize the 2002 sound like no other. There's decades of famous recordings. He's used signature cymbals as well in his career, but the 2002s are a huge part of the Alex Van Halen sound. It's a very lively cymbal. It's a responsive cymbal. It's crashable and creates that constant roar that's kind of one of the signature sounds of Alex Van Halen's drumming. We released it early in 2010 and continues to be a very popular model. By the way, the main difference in price between cymbal lines have to do with A, the amount of time it takes to make the cymbal, and B, the number of models and sizes that are available in that line. When a line has a broad range of models and sizes, such as the 2002s, it contributes greatly to the production of that line. Compared to, for example, the PST-5, which is the same material. It's a 2002 family of sound. It's the same alloy. The production method with the PST-5 is automated. So it takes exponentially more time to handcraft the 2002, and there's a great many more models and sizes available on that line. So that is largely what the difference in price comes from between cymbal lines.
Okay. I love the PST-5s, by the way. You know, the alloy is just amazing. And this cymbal, that was a really full-sounding cymbal. There's so much variety in the different styles of cymbals you offer. I think that's completely amazing. And like we talked about earlier, that you named specific models for the way they sound. I think that's really cool.
Well, the next episode, we have to get deep into both the 20 series and the Alpha Brilliance, which are a whole story unto themselves. And we've seen a lot of development with the Alpha line and a lot of acceptance by top international drummers. So that's a really great success story these days at Paiste.
Well, I just want to thank you so much. This is a dream come true for me. I cannot believe what we got set up here. I cannot believe your performances over the weekend. This is amazing. I just can't thank you so much for taking the time to do this and talk so much about the Paiste history, the product, and demonstrate so much of this for people to hear.
Well, it's been my privilege to be here with you, Paul, and it's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing the next episode.
Thank you very much.
The Paiste family has entrusted me with very many opportunities for which I'll forever be indebted. My experience with Paiste has been an adventure, and there's no reason to believe the best is behind me. Applying a lifetime of musical experience to learning the language of drummers, and more specifically the language of cymbal sound, has often paid off in this work. Suffice to say that turning student drummers on to how even the least expensive Paiste cymbals can provide a satisfying sound and function, and working with the most advanced drummers and percussionists around our most expressive instruments are equally rewarding. The latest gems from Paiste include our new Swiss crashes, the exquisite 20 Masters collection, a trip back to the roots with the reintroduction of Formula 602, and the 2002's 40th anniversary. After all these years, I still enjoy helping inquisitive drummers discover that elusive comfort zone in their cymbal sound, or demystifying for musicians and non-musicians alike the most user-friendly instruments of them all: gongs.
We're not done yet. We had to bug Ed once more at his hangar located at Crystal Airfield to see how he deals with the demands of life on the road. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Paul. What's going on, man?
Awesome. You see a helicopter out there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're in and out of here all the time.
At what point did you say, I want to really get involved with aviation? And how did you pull that together with working with Paiste?
In growing up, my father was a naval aviation design engineer for avionics. He helped establish the love of aviation from as long as I can remember. And so since 1998, I've had this Piper Dakota, and it serves me well. It's a powerful tool. A lot of guys that travel for a living hate the flying the most, and for me, when I can fly myself, it's my quality time. I've had a lot of fun using it for my business travel.
Can you cite some other drummers that are pilots?
A close friend of mine, his name is Paul Lime, and he's a first call session drummer in the Nashville scene. His discography is unbelievable. Randy Travis, Trisha Yearwood, Faith Hill. He's done a lot of her recordings and a little bit of touring. He's toured with Neil Diamond, subbing for Ronnie Tutt at times. But he's an active pilot, and his son actually flies F-16s for the Air Force. But he and I are good drumming aviation buddies.
Who are some drummers that you've hauled around in this plane?
Well, Carl Palmer, we did some clinic activity and some traveling in the airplane. Paul Wertico is a good friend of mine. We've done a lot of flying together. Sammy Marandino, he's played with Pat Metheny, kind of famous for playing with Cyndi Lauper actually for the last 10 or 12 years or more. He's a great drummer.
Well, as a representative of Paiste Cymbals, you also do drum clinics yourself. Can you tell me a little bit about putting on a clinic?
Well, I've been involved in doing a lot of that type of activity since the middle 80s. It's a really interesting part of my job. I really enjoy it. It gives me a chance to interact directly with all manner of drummers and percussionists. There's just so many incredible drummers and percussionists out there. You know, I feel like I'm at my best when I'm a student, and you know, it's a good example because when I do those kinds of things, workshops or clinics, oftentimes I feel like I learn more than maybe they do, and I always look forward to being there to learn from those drummers.
What is the true function of a clinic?
Well, it's really, and what I do mostly is teach drummers about Paiste cymbals and sounds, and showing them specific application of sounds. It's a pretty deep thing that Paiste brings to the party, so you need to connect the dots for people and fill in the blanks a little bit, as it were, and that's what I do.
Well, how much can you put in here if you're going to go on a clinic? I mean, how much stuff can you get in this plane?
Well, I guess I can take all the weapons and gels and about 800 pounds of cymbals I want on this, and don't have to worry about security or the carry-on or whatever, but it has its limitations. I can only take a certain volume of things in here. I can't fit anything bigger than a 38-inch gong in the Dakota, but I have been known to take a lot of stuff around. Most recently, we did a watershed event in Memphis called the Cymbals Summit at a place called the Memphis Drum Shop, and I took the back seats out. In fact, the airplane's configured that way right now to haul around a lot of instruments.
Now, you mentioned earlier in our private discussions about a similarity or differences between drumming and piloting. Can you address that a little bit?
Well, yeah, there's some interesting parallels in aviation. You know, I mentioned about feeling like I'm at my best when I'm a student, and that's something I think I've learned in aviation. You know, for example, when you get your pilot certificate, the FAA examiner will customarily say, this is your license to learn. And it's like that in music, you know, you never stop learning. There's always something on the horizon that you need to reacquaint yourself with, or something new you need to learn. And that process of focus and that process of having a mindset of a student is something that I find to be a profound parallel between music and aviation.
I have to admit, my view for this episode was grandiose. I bit off way more than I could chew. I wanted to show too much because there are so many more topics to talk about than what we could cram into a single episode. This helped us to focus on the sounds and the story of Paiste and introduce you to someone who has been an inspiration to me, Clift. Early on, Ed invited myself and others to his home often to personally introduce us to the Paiste instrument line. After hearing that I frequently broke cymbals, Ed took the time to teach me how to properly play a cymbal to not only increase the life of it, but to pull out the multiple voices locked within. I'd like to thank Ed Clift for his time, Paiste for their support, and of course the amazing team that was assembled for the creation of this episode, which was brilliantly captured at Winterland Studios in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Make sure to visit RajTalkingDrums.com often to keep up on all the current drumming news. Take care. Well, we've talked about how playing is important to your job. Can we take a look inside your plane?
It's a Piper Dakota, single engine, 4-place high performance airplane. I can fly from here down to Dallas in about 4.5 hours. Haul about 800-900 pounds of cymbals if I want.
One concern about this plane. There's something metal sticking out of the windshield. What is that thing?
That's the outside air temperature probe.
Okay. I'm glad you know that.
All right. Well, let's have a look. I'll show you the interior.
Cool.
I've had it since '98. I fly about 300 hours a year in it, which is probably a little bit more than most private pilots. All the instruments that you need to fly on instruments. I'm instrument trained and instrument equipped. A very capable airplane, really safe airplane. I take my family with me at times. It's just been a very powerful tool.
But more importantly, I noticed you got a mascot back here. Tell us about the mascot.
It's Boba Fett, longtime mascot of the Dakota. Actually, since I got it, Star Wars is a big part of my family history.
That is awesome, dude. You really got a lot of points with me on this one. This is really cool.
Maybe we can go for a flight sometime.
That would be amazing. I'd love that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, we'll make a hop over to Chicago, go see one of your favorite drummers.
Oh, that would be amazing, man. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, those were Formula 602 cymbals, and very heavy cymbals. Other players in that era were doing.
What's the complete family that the 2002 alloy is being used on?
I just told you.
I didn't hear alpha.
That's right.
See, I'm not as stupid as I look. No.
So yeah, there was one point where, what? What's that sound?
I don't know. It doesn't.
Oh,
I hear it too.
Not again, Paul. Get off of that. Get out.